Welcome to the StressOut podcast, where we explore strategies for maintaining work-related stress and burnout. Today, we have Velina Dragiyska, a neuropsychologist specializing in workplace mental health. Velina explores the interactions between our inner state and external expression, particularly in our professional lives. We will be discussing the science behind stress and practical ways to manage it. Velina, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Stress is such an important topic, and understanding how our brains process it, it can really help in managing it better.
Before we dive into specifics, could you start by explaining what exactly stress is? It's a term we hear all the time, but it can be hard to define.
Well, that's an excellent starting point. And you're right. Terms like stress, emotion, they're so embedded in our language, yet often misunderstood and even more often oversimplified. Back in the days, Hans Saye, one of the pioneering researchers on stress, described it as non-specific response of our body to any demand made upon it. This basically means that no matter the nature of the stressor, no matter the nature of the event, whether it could be a physical danger, an emotional challenge, or just like a psychological strain, our bodies react in fundamentally the same way. And he observed this universality in response while studying patients with wide range of illnesses. Despite their varying living conditions, many exhibited common symptoms like fever, loss of appetite, fatigue. He also replicated this observation with laboratory animals, poor rats. Uh, Basically, he was exposing them to different stressors. It could be extreme heat, cold, confinement, and those stressors produce similar physiological changes: elevated heart rate, increased breathing, and of course, release of adrenal hormones. This body seems does not differentiate between the source of the stress. It simply reacts. To put even a little bit further these specifics in our reaction, the generalized stress response, it's called general adaptation syndrome, and unfolds in fundamentally three stages. And first, we have the alarm stage, where the sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, preparing our body for immediate reaction. We often refer to this as a fight or flight response. It's very ancient body survival mechanism, basically a gift from our evolutionary ancestors. And then in the second stage, known as resistance, the body needs to remain highly alert, sustained by cortisol. I will speak more about this hormone because it's quite important. Uh, and other adrenal hormones. And these hormones provide the energy to persist in the face of ongoing challenges, to fight infections, heal wounds, and etc. Even when this stage is maintained for too long, and when we don't have opportunity to recover, we reach the third stage, which is the stage of exhaustion. Here, at this stage, the body, depleted of energy, becomes vulnerable, and both the nervous system and the immune system start to break down. We become very vulnerable to illness, burnout, emotional collapse. So, here is the key point. In modern life, nowadays, the nature of stress is fundamentally changed. We are no longer being chased by predators or escaping immediate physical dangers. Instead, our stressors are long term. It's not the threat of a bear or a storm, but the demands of advancing a career, paying a mortgage, or caring for a loved one who is sick, and etc. These stressors aren't fleeting, they can last for years. And while the threats of nowadays life are evolved, the body response is still the same. For our physiology, for our body, it does not matter if we're running from a bear or worrying about a dead one. The stress response is fundamentally the same. The challenge is that our bodies were designed to handle short bursts of stress, not the relentless pressures that modern life throws at us. Our bodies can sustain these stress responses for so long before entering exhaustion, when somehow we are stuck in a prolonged state of fight or flight. constantly bracing ourselves for threats that are more abstract, more persistent. And our nervous system don't discount the difference between immediate danger and chronic worry. They respond the very same way. So, what's interesting in the question of what comes first, the mental appraisal or the body response? Is it the thought is this is stressful that triggers the body to react, or it's the body's reaction that tells the mind, "Am I in danger?" The truth is they are very, very intertwined. Whether the stressor is external or internal, whether it's a bear or a mortgage payment, the physical experience is the same. Our heart race, our muscles are tense, our breathing becomes shallow, and so on. And without proper intervention or awareness, the stress, be it real or imagined, continues to wear us down.
It's fascinating how the body responds in a similar way to such different stressors. So, when we feel stressed, what's happening inside our brains? What triggers that response?
Well, that's excellent question. And to understand exactly how stress impacts the body, we basically need to look at two key systems that get activated when we experience stress. The first, more known perhaps, is the sympathetic nervous system, which is like the body's rapid response mechanism, our emergency alarm system. It's part of the autonomic nervous system, which governs all functions in the body that happen beyond our conscious control. Basically, we are not aware of them. And the sympathetic nervous system triggers the famous fight or flight response. By the way, there are more options than fight or flight. But yeah, let's focus on this. Imagine that when your body senses danger, regardless if it's an actual threat or imagined threat, it activates these systems almost instantly. Your heart rate increases, your airways open up, allowing more oxygen to flow, and blood flow increases to the areas of your body that you need the most, like legs, arms, so you can start running, start fighting. At the same time, other not so essential functions like digestion are put on hold because at this moment, survival is the body's priority. And this is a deeply evolutionary response designed to keep us alive in the face of immediate physical danger. But of course, life is not so simple now. We're rarely running from predators. Now we have more subtle stressors, yet they can be just as relentless. Work deadlines, financial pressures, or relationship conflicts, anything. And while this stressor might not seem so life-threatening at first, our bodies don't know the difference. Whether it's approaching deadline, approaching bear, the body reacts as its survival is at stake. And now I want to say something more about the second system involved in that response. We have the HPA axis starting from hypothalamus. This system reacts a little bit slower, but it becomes more dominant response when the stress is prolonged. It's the body way of dealing with ongoing, persistent challenges. And basically, how it works is when the brain detects a stressor, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which prompts to the adrenal cortex, part of the adrenal glands, to release cortisol. This is the very famous stress hormone that I mentioned before. And cortisol plays a pivotal role in how our body manages the stress. It's like fuel. It boosts metabolism and raising blood sugar levels to give the body the energy it needs to continue facing the stressor. What's fascinating is that researchers often measure cortisol levels to assess someone's recent stress. Its release is directly tied to the amount of stress we're experiencing. While sympathetic nervous system handles acute short-term stressors, the HPA axis kicks in when the stress is more chronic, like when you're dealing with something more enduring, like overwhelming work situation, difficult like family dynamic. And over time, this constant release of cortisol begins to take its toll. Here is where the complexity of stress comes to play. Stress and cortisol have both beneficial and harmful effects in small, manageable doses. Cortisol is helpful. It improves the attention, enhances the memory formation in hippocampus, and it helps us perform better in, like, let's say, simple and straightforward tasks. But here is the crucial point. If the stress is too intense or prolonged, like a trauma response, the effects can shift from being helpful to harmful. It can impair complex thinking, making it difficult to take any decisions, and eventually it does affect emotional regulation and the immune system. So, long term activation of stress response, especially prolonged exposure to cortisol, doesn't just affect the brain, it begins to disrupt nearly every system in the body. This can lead to a lot of health problems, from anxiety, depression, any kind of physical ailments like digestive problems, chronic headaches, muscle pain. Over time, stress can also contribute to heart disease, high blood pressure, and of course stroke. It impacts our ability to sleep, which is a symptom in many disorders. Also, we can see a lot of changes in our weight, memory, and in the ability to focus because it affects the frontal lobe when decision take place in our brains, and our memory, which happens like the long-term potentiation happens in the neurons in our hippocampus. And so, in short, you see, this topic it's not a short one, but in short, the body begins to pay the price of the prolonged stress. So while the stress is like a necessary part of life and it can be helpful in some situations, it's really all about balance. When the balance tips too far, when the stress becomes chronic, it starts to break down the very systems designed to protect us. Perhaps that's why stress management isn't just about finding ways to cope. It's about recognizing that our bodies and minds are deeply interconnected. Prolonged stress wears us down from the inside out. The goal then is not to eliminate the stress entirely, because that's impossible. That's delusional thinking. But to develop awareness, to develop resilience, so we can restore the balance and give our bodies the chance to recover and heal.
But how does the brain differentiate between short term and chronic stress?
Well, short-term stress or acute stress activates the stress response temporarily. It goes away once the situation is over. The brain is equipped to handle this well. It's designed to deal with immediate challenges and then go back to state of balance. Like the sympathetic system is on, and then the parasympathetic system is on, which acts in the completely opposite way. It slows down the breathing, makes it deeper, it stimulates digestion, and etc. Chronic stress occurs when the system is activated, the sympathetic, for a very long time. The brain does not have chance to return to normal functioning, leading to prolonged exposure to stress hormones because the HPA axis is working there and then the cortisol levels are rising. Then this is what result in lasting changes even in the brain structure, especially in the areas of hippocampus, prefrontal cortex. They're crucial for memory and decision making. And over time, chronic stress basically wears down the ability of the brain to regulate itself.
Can stress even be beneficial for our brains and body?
Yeah, absolutely. In manageable amounts, stress can be beneficial. There is even a term, Eurostress. This is the positive side. It can boost cognitive functioning, help us stay alert, motivate us to meet deadlines, achieve goals. In the right context, stress can enhance greatly our performance by pushing us to focus, to take action. But again, here the balance is the key. When stress becomes chronic, it starts to have exactly the opposite effect.
And how does our environment, such as workplace or home, influences the way we experience stress?
Well, Our environment, of course, plays a significant role in shaping how we experience and manage stress. A supportive, organized environment, whether at home or work, can help mitigate the stress by providing stability, predictability. On the other hand, if we have chaotic, high pressure, unsupportive environment, it can greatly amplify the stress we experience. In workplaces, factors like job demands, lack of control, poor work life balance can trigger stress responses. And in our homes, conflict, lack of personal space, exposure to constant noise, even, can increase the stress levels. The environment essentially sets the stage for how our brain interprets the stressors and how we respond to them.
You previously mentioned that long-term stress can lead to permanent changes in the brain. How exactly does this happen?
Yeah, long-term stress can indeed have lasting effects on the brain, especially if it's not managed properly. When we talk about chronic stress, which can persist for weeks, months, or even years, it can lead to significant changes in key areas of the brain. First, worth mentioning, long-term stress can shrink the prefrontal cortex. Basically, this is the area responsible for higher cognitive functions like decision making, impulse control, problem solving. This makes it harder to think rationally, to control emotional responses or behavior even. This stops us from making well thought out decisions. Under chronic stress, the prefrontal cortex becomes less effective, leading to impulsive actions, difficulty concentrating. Then we have observed changes in amygdala, a structure located in the temporal lobe, also deeply affected. The amygdala is paired structure, meaning you have one of each side of your brain, and it plays crucial role in processing emotions, especially fear. Often we refer to it as the brain's fear center. Evolutionary, it was and still is essential for survival. It learns from the things we see, hear, experience that we have had, and it learns to identify what's dangerous. For example, if you encounter something threatening, like a dangerous animal, your amygdala will store that information. And next time when you come across something similar, it triggers a fear response to help you keep you safe, basically. Of course, this is slightly oversimplified, but I think you get the point. The amygdala also connects to areas of the brain that processes senses like smell, vision, hearing, which is why certain signs or sounds can immediately provoke fear or emotional responses. And what's interesting is it grows under chronic stress, making your brain even more sensitive to stressful situations. This is something that we refer to as long-term potentiation of the synapses responses. So as a result, you might experience basically heightened fear of anxiety, even in situations that wouldn't normally be considered dangerous. Other areas of the brain that are impacted by stress, like hippocampus, I mentioned it before. Hippocampus is critical for memory formation, for learning. Long-term stress can impair this area, making it harder to form new memories and remember details. People often notice that they're more forgetful or find it difficult to concentrate under stress. So the hippocampus also helps regulate the stress levels. Damage to this area can make it even harder to manage ongoing stress effectively, leading to a really vicious cycle. And together, these changes can result in a brain that's oversensitive to stress, leading to difficulties with emotional regulation, decision making, memory. The more the amygdala grows in response to stress, the more likely you are to perceive everyday challenges as threats, triggers, and even more stress and anxiety. Uh, but there are good news. The good news is that the brain has incredible ability to adapt and recover through neuroplasticity. This means that with the right stress management techniques, whether it is mindfulness, regular exercises, proper sleep, the brain can rebuild and reverse some of these changes. While chronic stress can lead to lasting changes, they're not permanent. And with proper care, you can retrain your brain to handle stress more effectively.
How does stress affect productivity and decision making, especially in the workplace?
Well, stress has a direct impact on productivity and decision making, especially in high pressure environments like work. When we're stressed, the brain's ability to process information efficiently basically diminishes. And we tend to rely more on emotional responses rather than rational thinking. This can result, of course, in poor decision making, impulsivity, and like different difficulty concentrating. Stress also leads to fatigue, which reduces overall productivity. People under stress may experience burnout, where their performance declines because their mental and emotional resources are basically depleted. So, creating a supportive, low stress work environment is essential for fostering good decision making and maintaining productivity.
Well, that's an interesting take. I have another question for you. Can childhood stress affect how we handle stress as adults?
Yeah, definitely. Childhood stress, especially when it's prolonged or traumatic, can have profound impact on how we handle stress in adulthood. Early life experience shape brain development, particularly in regions that regulate emotion and stress, like amygdala and hippocampus. If a child is exposed to chronic stress, their stress response system can become overreactive, leading to heightened sensitivities to stress later in life. Additionally, patterns of coping with stress are often learned in childhood, so people who experience high levels of stress early on might struggle later with emotional regulation or feel more overwhelmed by stress as adults.
That's interesting. What role do you think neurotransmitters play in stress management?
Well, neurotransmitters are absolutely vital when it comes to managing stress because they are the chemical messengers that govern nearly all of our brain functioning, especially in areas like mood, focus, our stress response itself. The way our brains process and react to stress depends heavily on the delicate balance of those chemicals. I'll give you some examples. Serotonin, often called feel-good neurotransmitter, is central to how we experience emotions. It help us regulate mood in many ways, and it also serves as a natural buffer against stress. When our serotonin levels are well balanced, we're better equipped to handle challenges without becoming overwhelmed. But if they're low, which often happens during prolonged stress, we're more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, feelings of despair. In a way, it's like brain soul's balance system. When it's depleted, we lose that inner grounding that should have or supposed to have. And of course, we lose our resilience. And then we have the famous dopamine, which is tied to our sense of motivation and reward. Dopamine is where it's what drives us to get up in the morning, pursue meaningful activities. But under stress, dopamine levels can drop, making it harder to feel pleasure or fulfillment, even when we do things that normally excite us. This is why chronic stress can often lead to sense of disconnection or emotional numbness. You start to feel like you're just going through the motions without joy or purpose, and over time, this can contribute to burnout. Dopamine helps us keep moving forward, but when the stress diminishes it, that forward movement is basically lost. And another key player here is the GABA neurotransmitter, which acts like the brain natural tranquilizer. It calms down neuroactivity, helps us to reduce feelings of anxiety, tension. You can think of it as a soothing balm. When stress hits, it steps in to calm the nervous system. Without GABA neurotransmitter, your brain is left in a constant state of overactivity, which leads to racing thoughts, physical tension, and so on. These neurotransmitters, let's be clear, do not operate in isolation. They are part of beautifully interconnected system, constantly interacting parts one another. When we're in balance, we feel grounded, motivated, capable of facing life challenges. But when that balance is disrupted, whether by chronic stress, poor lifestyle habits, or external pressures, our ability to cope diminishes. The good news is that we can nurture this balance. Healthy practices like proper nutrition, regular physical activities, mindfulness, or meaningful social interactions. Very key way. Those activities can help restore neurotransmitter levels and protect the brain from the damaging effects of the stress. In essence, neurotransmitters are biochemical foundation of how we experience and manage stress. By understanding them and by actively supporting their balance, we can enhance our capacity to navigate life's pressures, to reclaim our own well-being.
I'm happy that we have good news in such a complex system. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you think our listeners should know about the relationship between stress and the brain?
I would say that what's important to remember is that while stress is unavoidable, we can manage it, and the management is within our control. Your brain is incredibly adaptive. Thanks to neuroplasticity and thanks to so many evolutionary gifts that we have received, we can change at any point and improve our overall well-being, like practicing healthy habits, coping strategies. We can rewire the brain to become more resilient to stress, and understanding that stress is a natural part of life, but also recognizing the power we have to manage it. It can be very empowering, actually.
That's a great note to end on. Velina, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. This was an incredibly insightful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I hope this information helps the listeners in managing their stress more effectively.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, while stress is inevitable, taking steps to manage it can lead to a healthier mind and body. Thank you, Velina, for sharing your insights on exploring individual differences in stress responses. To our listeners, remember to check out Velina's LinkedIn profile, where you can find contact info, and stay tuned for our next episode. Head over to stressout-project.eu to learn more about our initiative. Make sure to download the StressOut mobile app to learn how to manage work-related stress and burnout efficiently. Also, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at StressOut-project. Thank you for tuning in.